And now we've got Devin Green coming up, and she is one of our fantastic new therapists that's just come on board. There she is. There's the beautiful face.
Hi.
Devin, hi, how are we doing?
Fabulous. How is everyone?
Great, thank you. We've got quite a good attendance at the moment, and obviously what I just want to say is you've got a Q&A at the bottom of the screen, so sometimes it pops up, that's the private messages, and then the open chat is on the right hand side. So you keep an eye on it, because everybody is quite interactive. It's been quite nice, bouncy off of queries and questions.
Okay.
But you're obviously going to be doing defining fetishes and fantasy fulfillment.
Yes, and what a great honor and pleasure it is. Again, my name is Devin. I'm one of the sex and relation therapists here at Pineapple Support. Yeah, I'll try my best to try to multitask and answer some things and click around and everything. But
excellent. Well, I'm gonna leave you to it now, Devin. So you can I'll come back in after you finished your session. But I love you and leave you with the lovely audience. Okay.
Okay.
See you
so
soon.
Much. So I will share my screen. So yes, how do I make this one? Okay, so today I, like Kelly said, have the honors of doing a presentation on fetishes and fantasy fulfillment. So first I'm going to define the difference between the two, because a lot of people tend to think that these are intertwined, but I think it's important to kind of distinguish the difference between the two in regards to fulfillment. And then I'll briefly go over some common fantasies and fetishes that you may see across the US, and briefly define the buzzwords, the ones that you hear about mostly within Kink and BDSM community, and just maybe in your personal lives in general. I'll go over different forms of lifestyles in the BDSM and Kink community, and forms of Kink communities as well there. And then we'll get into the fun part, which is play. Where to play, where you can find communities that offer safe spaces for you to play, and also other resources where you can get linked to that as well. And then of course, I will get into the nitty gritty of how to incorporate these things into put it into your healing, so that you can use it as a form to treat trauma, to overcome trauma, and of course use that to reclaim your sense of autonomy and agency. So first, defining the two. A sexual fantasy is defined by Lettenberg and Henning as mental imagery that is sexually arousing or erotic to an individual. So examples of this could be having, mental imagery or fantasies about having sex with your boss, or maybe your partner engaging in sexual acts with another individual. The moment that it kind of evolves into fetishes is if you have some kind of sexual desire, or in which gratification is linked to a particular object, item of clothing, or part of the body. So once that objectification is manifested, for example, I know some people have foot fetishes. Some people like to use objects like blindfolds, whips, and chains, and things of that nature. Some people really like for their partners to wear stockings, or being the mummification realm of completely being restrained in their body. So that's how it kind of evolves into a fetish. And keeping in note that fetishes coexist with sexual fantasies, but fetishes don't always have to involve presence in fantasy play. So just knowing the difference between those two. So now I want to share a really interesting and hope everyone could see this pretty clearly, but this is an interesting fetish map of the United States of America. I couldn't find one on different countries, but I'd be curious to see that as well. And as you can see, kind of down south near Texas, where I'm from, whipping and the use of chains and maybe floggings are very prevalent. And then you kind of get into the Midwest where we see bondage, masochism, group sex, impact play, and then up north, kind of some leather, lots of suits, BDSM. Yeah, lots of that going on up north. Of course, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will touch on the most popular ones and the ones that you've probably that are not as obvious as, for example, group sex. But in the next slide, the most searched fetishes in the United States, based on the count of states searching for each one of the most. So masochism is definitely one of the popular ones, with 5 states being the average most search for that. Group sex, that can involve orgies, pretty much any sex that has more than 2 individuals. We have some sadism, sports gear. Again, I'm not going through the whole list, but I could probably off the top of my head recognize the most common ones, which are BDSM, which is bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, and masochism. The S and M in that is sadism, is someone who likes to inflict pain on another individual for sexual arousal. And then the reverse is masochism, someone who likes pain inflicted into them for sexual arousal. I know that edging is pretty popular as well, in which typically the dominant partner pretty much withheld the submissive climax, especially when they're going to reach that point. In my opinion, the most intense and powerful form of play out there as well. We have voyeurism, when it's typically when someone likes to view an individual or groups of individuals engaging in sexual activity, and I always trip on this word, but exhibitionism, which is the opposite, where individuals like to usually be watched engaging in sexual activities with their partners and others. You also, and I think I see this on here, is cuckolding, which is when usually a married or couple partner likes to watch their partner have sexual acts with people outside of that dynamic. So let me pause here to see if there's any questions so far. So from Michael, we have, with a pronounced interest in certain taboo sex acts often featured in porn, such as an ass to mouth, qualify as a fetish in your opinion? That's a good question, Michael. I feel that it could be a fetish since it's a particular object or part of a person's body that needs to be objectified there, such as to mouth. Then it maybe could qualify as a fetish, in my opinion at least. People could feel free to have a discussion there, but I'm not sure if that was shared privately or openly, but that's definitely a good question. Okay, so let me see if I can move that. So now that we've kind of touched on the different types of fetishes that are out there and that are kind of common in the particular regions of the world, I want to definitely go through some red flags and risks to consider in engaging with any play or fantasy fulfillment, kink fulfillment. You, of course, first want to have that consent always. It should be clear, it should be direct, and it should be respected. It's also important to not only check in the beginning of that fantasy fulfillment or play, but throughout, within, and even after. And we'll kind of touch on aftercare near the end of the presentation as well. But it's definitely always important to have that consent established and maintained throughout the play and interaction with your play partner or partners. You also want to keep in mind how much time, energy, and money is being spent on fantasy and fetish fulfillment. If you are going broke trying to, rent out dungeons, which we'll go into later, are just not really budgeting well enough to maybe see a professional dom every week, then you want to reassess that and maybe take a step back and kind of see what's more realistic for you. If you are at all isolating yourself as a result of fantasy fulfillment and fetish fulfillment, it's definitely a red flag. If you are not in touch with your social support, your friends, your families, and your loved ones, definitely maybe seek professional help, touch in with a sex therapist or sexologist, or even a therapist that specializes in human sexuality or is sex positive at least. And in general, if any of your activities of daily living, eating, sleeping, going to work, doing the adult thing is affected in any way, then you should have that as a red flag, or just keep in mind that you have limits within yourself and boundaries too that you need to maintain. So now that was established, checking in. Okay, and people are saying it's hard to see the screen, so let me share this again. Sorry, guys. I'm kind of going back and forth with it. Okay. And I could send this in the chat as well if people want to see within my resources where I'm getting my information from, so you could pull up the articles yourself too. So the different lifestyles within fantasy and kink fulfillment, fetish fulfillment, we have two main communities, and that's the BDSM community and the kink community as well. So first off, getting into the BDSM community, it typically involves scenes that consist of some dungeons. I know I like to think of it as a safe, controlled environment where you could explore with whether your partner or maybe a pro dom that's on site. It's spaces that you typically rent out, and it's literally, they usually are equipped with cages and all types of equipment ranging from whips and chains and all different kind of physical restraints. I'm not sure with COVID what's opening. I've been kind of getting updates on things. And again, I only know of places in the more sex positive cities such as LA, New York, and Berlin. But I do know that in LA, if I have any listeners there, there's East and West Dungeon that is really a really good place to book these type of spots if you're looking to explore and be intrigued in that type of setting or setting your scene up there. They also host a number of different events and mixers around BDSM, especially if you're just kind of stepping into that realm and wanting more information and building a community of kink-friendly individuals that you could build a network with. I know also that there's kink B&Bs, which are like Airbnbs, but they're specifically for kink-friendly activity, and there's spaces that you can rent out. And I know those are pretty much all over the world, if I'm not mistaken. Again, COVID may have put a halt on things, but hopefully, since we're ending the end of this pandemic, that things will be opening back up soon. You also have places like in New York, I know that there's Pandora's Box and Donatella's Den, which Donatella's Den for sure, they have different kind of rooms tailored to different type of scenes. So for example, they have a classroom set up for people who may be interested in doing a teacher and student kind of scene. They have a medical scene set up that mimics a doctor's office if you're into any nurse patient kind of things. They also have the typical dungeon set up and everything of that nature. And what I also like about the places in New York is that there's typically usually a pro dom on site, which we'll get into now. Pro doms means professional dominatrix. They are individuals who I think are a vital part of healing trauma. I know for me specifically, as a sex therapist, if I have a client who's struggling with any sexual anxiety or maybe just wants to boost their confidence or may struggle with low self-worth or just having to deal with things that they may still carry with them that went on in the past, I make it a part to have it in their treatment plan at some point to engage or book or work with a pro dom alongside seeing me as well. And yeah, I'll read this quote. It's from The Guardian, and it is about from the perspective of a pro dom, what she offers and what her services look like. Men, women, and everyone in between tend to come to me for one or two reasons: to gain new skills for BDSM play inside and outside of the bedroom or dungeon, or to improve confidence in non-kinky aspects of life, to learn how to make life their bitch, as I like to say. And that was from a Los Angeles-based dominatrix named Princess Marks. And again, I think the common misconception is that people book an hour or the pro dom to get slapped and humiliated and things of that nature, even though that can be a component of it. I like to think of it as, if you can endure an hour of that discomfort and just being kind of out of control in a sense, then you can definitely be resilient in that maybe board meeting that makes you uncomfortable, or asking a raise for your boss, or if you're typically in the submissive dynamic in your everyday life, it could show you that there is another side of me that I could exist within. So I definitely have so much honor and respect for pro doms and the work that they do for the community and for the human psyche as a collective. Let me see if I could get some questions in. I'm seeing, oh, you're welcome, Michael. Yeah, so, oh, and another important thing to keep in mind when thinking of the BDSM community is that there is psychological power play. Play kind of within a dominant submissive aspect that goes beyond the dungeon and the bedroom and the scene, that some partners, this is the way they coexist with another, and this is just their power dynamic indefinitely. So also keeping that in mind when we're thinking of the BDSM community, because that often gets overlooked. And you also have kink communities, which is another aspect of it. Again, there's a lot of kinks out there, and the main ones that I kind of want to briefly touch on are any furry kink communities, cosplay, people that are into costumes. I would suggest, if you're looking for your people or your tribe within your area, I know that there's FetLife that many people may be familiar with, but it's just a platform for kink-friendly communities to network and meet and build that sense of belonging for one another. People also don't know that Meetup, which is an app that's typically for gardening and hiking and yoga, they also have kink-friendly communities and whatever particular kink that you're looking into. I would suggest to just take a look there and see what's available to you. And now we're getting into the play part. Let me see. Okay, sorry, I'm looking at the chat too. Okay, so I'll get to those in a second. So for the play piece, it's the most important part, I feel, especially everybody viewing this may be in different parts of their journey. So I really want to just break down, again, what I feel is the best routes to take in as far as introducing yourself into this realm. Or if you already are a part of it, if you want to try something new, I have some suggestions as well. Again, with COVID, I'm not sure what's going on, but hopefully there's going to be some changes within there soon. And also keeping in mind, I can only speak on things that I could vouch for and that I could say for sure that I've been and I've checked out and that I know that I could confidently recommend to other people. And I'll put these in the chat near the end as well, so don't worry if you miss it. But first, I guess I want to go into the kind of more traditional route, which is swingers clubs, fetish balls, passion parties. These are kind of, you kind of have to be within the community, know someone, have some invites, you know, see what's going on locally within your particular region. But they're kind of more in the private sense, like it's very close knit typically, and you kind of have to know a partner and go with them and things of that nature. But again, I would suggest using platforms like FetLife and Meetup and even Filled, which is typically more so for dating slash meeting other kinky people, but I found that it's easy to meet a lot of different people and even create your own communities within that. So that is an option as well. You do also have public spaces that are pretty much venues that are dedicated to providing that safe and controlled space for communities of people to come in together and play safely with one another. I know there's a big one in Europe called Kit I don't know if I have any listeners from Berlin, but that's a really good example of pretty much a sex club that hosts a number of different fetish fantasies and fulfillment parties. My personal favorite is House of Yes out in New York. They pride themselves on theme parties, and this image here of the Star Wars is actually from one of their events. And I mean, they have a number of theme parties from Grinch That Stole Christmas to disco to BDSM to full latex. What I like about them as well is that costumes and consent are required upon entry. So they take pride in taking that seriously and making sure that everybody that walks through the door understands and respects that. And again, it's also an open space. So if you're just beginning and trying to check the scene out and get a feel for things, I think it's a really safe space to do so. I did check and they are temporarily closed, but they should be opening. They're saying sometimes this summer, so hopefully if anybody is out in that area, you could check them out. Again, drop anything in the chat box if you know of anything that's within your area, but I can unfortunately only speak on the regions that I've explored. Yeah, so I want to take a brief pause if there's any questions about any of those. Again, I'm going to try to chat all of those before I end everything, but I just wanted to make sure that that was cool before I transition into the incorporating healing into this, which is a whole nother segment I have to get serious about. Okay. Okay. So now that we've touched on the difference between fantasy and fetishes, we've kind of briefly went over the most common types of fetishes across the US. We've touched on red flags and risks, which is super important. We've went into some lifestyles. We explored, you know, where to go to play or how we may start to venture off into that. Once that's all established and you've created understanding of that, how do we use this to heal trauma? How do we use kink and play and BDSM to kind of process things? Oh, I got you, John. I'll get it at the end. To process things and to use it as a means of growth and empowerment. First, before I get into that, I definitely wanted to define what trauma is because I often get a lot of misconceptions that trauma is usually this big, event that's usually physically or sexually related in a sense, which that definitely is a part of it. But people need to realize too that trauma, it can be emotional, it can be psychological. You can have trauma from, the daily microaggressions that you deal with on a daily basis by being a person of color in this world. You could experience trauma from, something that happened in middle school and you got rejected to the school dance. It could be on any end of the extremes and on the spectrum. So never minimizing anything that you've been through because it definitely may still have an effect on you today. Um, Trauma is a normal reaction to abnormal events. So, um, that can mean different things to different people. But the thing to understand is that for some people, the mind and the body still feels that we're in that space when in theory, presently we're not. It's just certain people, places, things, or emotions that may trigger us to make it feel like we're still in that space. So typically in treating trauma, even beyond sex therapy or not even having that a part of the discussion, it usually involves facing the unpleasant memory, taking ownership of it, releasing whatever pent up flight or fight responses that you have as a result of that trauma, and of course, reclaiming control and agency over it. The fascinating thing about this community, however, is that all of those things are actually taking place in kink, play, and BDSM. Because it's there that the body becomes a source of your pleasure, which allows you to take back ownership, allows you to be back within your sense of worth and autonomy. You're communicating, especially for people, like I mentioned earlier, that are more submissive in their day to day lives and presentation. This is probably the only space within their scene that they're communicating. I like this. I don't like that. More, less. Let's try this. That didn't work for me. Whatever the case may be, and that within itself can be super empowering, especially in healing people that have dealt with trauma and that are trauma survivors. And most importantly, it gives you the power and pleasure, which is essentially our birthright. But a lot of people tend to forget that when so much guilt and shame and negative automatic thoughts come up, or if there's things deeply rooted within the psyche that don't allow us to be a part of that. So BDSM and kink comes in many different forms. It's not always involving, the when we're to the point where we're giving and receiving pain. It could be as simple as role reversal, role playing, power exchange, and exploring that different dynamic. Also spanking and then getting into the more physical restraints and things of that nature, but having different degrees of that as well. So keeping that in mind when you're creating your scene, and for the people that do not know, sorry, I should have defined it. A scene is an act that you create for yourself and kind of a safe space and container for you to just explore the trauma and maybe a narrative where you're in control, or to just simply experience different things that are kind of beyond your comfort zone. So it can all be a sexual practice about power dynamics or simply experiencing pain and pleasure as well. There's no right or wrong way. A lot of people feel they get into this lifestyle and scene and have to take it to the extreme. But personally, for me, I think getting back to basics is probably what's best. And by basics, I mean just checking into power exchange and the power dynamics within a sub and a dom dynamic. And it also involves play, which is a form of release to process trauma as well. I've been doing therapy with a while, and sometimes just talking about it isn't enough. We're not receptive there to process and digest things that are going on. Sometimes we need play as a means to make it more approachable, make it more digestible for us to receive ourselves. And I wanted to just share some findings because I'm big on data and everything. So, in a paper published in March 2017 in the journal Psychology of Consciousness Theory, Research and Practice, scientists found that for those who practice BDSM, practicing in BDSM acts can create a pleasant, altered state of consciousness. Additionally, for the 14 experienced BDSM practitioners studied, the researchers discovered that overall BDSM encounters were associated with reductions in psychological stress and an increase in sexual arousal. Another earlier study published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine looked at the psychological characteristics of people who practice BDSM. The findings revealed that BDSM practitioners were less neurotic, more extroverted, more conscientious, more open to new experiences, less sensitive to rejection, and had a higher sense of subjective well-being than those who didn't participate in BDSM activities. So I'm big on data and like seeing what science has to say about things. So I found that really interesting, but the best experiences of your own, just trying to see what's out there for yourself. So I definitely invite definitely people with this knowledge and new and understanding and curiosity to feed that, and definitely do so in a controlled and safe setting. So now I'm briefly going to touch on the 3 steps that are most important when we're using kink and play in BDSM to heal trauma. I do want to express and open this up by saying, whether you're new to this realm or you've been doing it and incorporating new things, I would highly encourage and recommend that you do have a sex therapist, sexologist, regular therapist that specializes in any form of human sexuality, or someone that is just sex positive to go through this with you and guide you and be by your side. Because the last thing that we want to do is re-traumatize ourselves or, take any steps back when we're trying to do the exact opposite of that. So the step number 1 is having a plan and being very intentional about it for your BDSM or kink scene. What are your hard no's? And going into detail of what that boundary and what that limit is for you. If but play is a hard no for you, does that mean no penetration there? Does that mean that there's not even any ass to mouth? Like really breaking it down, because things could kind of escalate and one thing lead to another, especially when you're within the scene. Next is, what kind of play exactly are we getting into? If we say impact play, which I don't think I defined that earlier, which is where the individual has to receive some form of impact, such as hitting or spanking, slapping, and maybe even punching. What is the hard no there? Where is the boundary? If we're going to engage in this kind of play, what does that look like for me? Because it may be different from on the receiving end and what they're administrating into me. So keeping that in mind as well. And of course, having your safe words and actions in place. If we're going to be not able to vocally say no or have that safe word to vocalize, what hand movements are we using, which is very important to you, because again, it's easy to get lost in the moment, lost within the scene, and we definitely don't want any abuse or further trauma or putting yourself at any danger or harm. Once that's established, and again, this step is, I'm saying it as if it's like easy, 1, 2, 3. That step alone may take weeks and weeks of planning with your therapist, weeks and weeks of establishing with your partner or partners. Again, especially if you're beginning and just stepping your foot into this, it could take you a while to just figure out what your hard no's are, and are figuring out what you're into by doing the research and going through what's out there. But once all that is determined, no matter how long it takes, it's not a race. There's no pace to that. You could get into the play. And this is where you experience pain, fear, excitement, arousal. all within a safe and a controlled space. Determine what scene excites you and intrigues you. If anything that I mentioned caught your interest and you want to know more about it, I'll drop my email and social media platforms to talk more or give you whatever articles I think I saw um, a need for that there. And yeah, once that's established, find a partner you feel safe to do it with. Again, a professional is highly encouraged, a pro dom who's already well versed and trained in that. Uh, um, One who could probably link your particular trauma to a particular scene, or could probably help guide you through that. But if not, if you don't already have a partner, going to those parties and things that I mentioned to find one, or maybe on the Field app, which kind of gives you more control of what you're interested in and your desire, and finding like-minded people who are in alignment with that. And explore the trauma in a safe place. An example I like to give is maybe someone who was verbally abused as a child growing up, and they maybe go to a pro dom or set a scene with their partner in which they like to be humiliated, where they like to be talked down upon, where they like to be feel inferior in that moment. But again, giving them ability to have that safe word, to say stop, to endure it in a way that's within their control and not as an external factor, um, allows them to reclaim that narrative and rewrite it in their own way, while simultaneously getting pleasure out of it. So, yeah, explore it in a safe place. Again, that's only a very tiny example. It gets really diverse. Some people do multiple scenes within one. Some people, have to try different things, but it's kind of finding what works for you. And again, it helps to have professional dom or a therapist to kind of help guide you through that, because it can be difficult on your own. And then, of course, following up with a therapist. This is what we're here for. To just help be there to guide you and to process those things and to see how it worked for you. Which brings me to step 3, which is, of course, the most important as well: integrating all of this into real life. When the scene ends, when you get out the dungeon and, you're out of the bedroom, we don't want to kind of be like, okay, that was neat, and, just keep it under wraps. We want to incorporate it into our day to day lives. We want to change our behaviors and our thoughts and our well being as a result. So step 3 is integrating explored realizations into real life. Again, that helps with a therapist, but if not, just journaling about it, talking with it with your support system, having that aftercare piece, which I'm going to touch on now, to determine how was the scene for you, what worked, what didn't, what can your partner or the pro dom or whoever's involved do differently next time. What made you feel like, wow, that was really breakthrough for me, we got to try it again next time? What really maybe had you, thinking of things that happened in the past and probably aren't as effective? um that's the aftercare piece that's probably even more important than the planning piece itself, because it's that check-in that you need. Just checking time here, I'm going to wrap it up soon, but it's that check-in that you need. And another important thing to keep in mind for that aftercare piece, that follow-up, a lot of people like to do it after immediately, which is fine, but also keeping in mind that trauma can probably show up even later in the week. It's not always immediate. You always want to maybe do a weekly check-in. If you're into meditation and being in tune with the body, see if any anxiety or things are coming up in that nature, because again, trauma is really tricky. It shows up in different ways. But hopefully this is just a alternative approach to help try to treat it. So that's my piece. I know I have like 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna try to see what's in the chat here. Oh, okay. So love Kit Kat. We love Kit Kat. What is Kit Kat? It is a magical place, again, in Berlin, out in Germany. Sorry, John, I just got to it, but it is in a sense a sex club. It's different from House of Yes, which kind of walks you into it and everybody is kind of curious and exploring. Kit Kat, from my experience, you go in, you know, they're already kind of setting the scene. So wouldn't suggest it for beginners, but it is quite the place to experience, especially if you're already well versed in this platform. But if not, again, I don't know where everyone is, but New York, if you're ever in town, out in Bushwick, Brooklyn, there is House of Yes, which is kind of a more beginner's approach to it, is what I would say. Any more questions for the last 5 minutes we have? I'm trying to look at these too. You're welcome, Michael. Where can you find your list of book recommendations? I'm not sure. Can you clarify which book, like, are you meaning the resources that I provided? Let me give you these articles too while I have you. So, Everyday Health. This was a really good article. And then, so what I'm seeing is I'm sending the article to where I got the benefits of BDSM, and also the article where I got the graphs that kind of broke down the different types of the different types of kinks and fetishes across the US. And then let me see, I got some questions here. Submissive. Oh, I got a good one. Okay, hold on. As a POC, my brain tells me my submissive and finding pleasure is being degraded or used, rape scene. Is a form of me adding on to being colonized and oppressed, or is it healing? Very good question. Thank you, anonymous attendee. As a person of color, I'm going to be honest too. I'm into the same, but I think it's all about your perception of this. Again, in creating a scene, you're supposed to be in control. You're supposed to have autonomy of everything that's going on. So even if those questions are popping up, it's a red flag to maybe, you know, reassess that form of play for yourself, you know, especially if words like colonize and oppression are showing up for you. Again, process it with a therapist. I can't go too much of it in 3 minutes, but you are valid in that. And it is a constant concern that I hear from people. And the first thing I say, if it's not for you, then it's not for you. Because if the scene being set is not for your pleasure and your fulfillment, then it's only re-traumatizing you more. Oh, okay. Resources you can share. Thank you. All right. And I'm seeing, sorry, I'm like looking at 3 boxes. Anyway, okay. Any advice for helping therapists understand the value of our work as pro-doms, therapeutic kink practitioners? So I'm blessed to be surrounded around very sex positive sex therapists. So but before I was into this room, I was doing traditional CBT, DBT therapy. But my secret is that I used to be a part of this pro-dom world. So I already naturally had a heart and an understanding and was empathetic towards that. So my advice is maybe you have to be the education there. And if they are not open to being educated and advocating for you and learning about you through guided discovery, which is pretty much a requirement for therapists practicing in the field, then they are not culturally competent. They are not as insightful as they're supposed to be and expected to be. So my advice, just to answer quickly, is try to educate them. Try to paint a picture of what your world is like from your point of view. And if they are not receptive at all, you know, maybe find people within this community that are more so, because it unfortunately isn't your job to do it. You can educate them, but they should be doing the education on themselves as well. Okay. So are there any other questions or anything? You guys had some really good ones. Let me see. So Marissa, is this okay? What about as a sex worker? I want to service all my clients, but I'm concerned about re-traumatizing a POC through race play. What are your thoughts? Okay, what about as a sex worker? I want to serve, but I'm concerned about, okay. So again, it may take some further checking in and realize, like really rooting down, who is this serving? You know, if you're a person of color coming in and you're wanting race play, maybe as a person of color coming in and just like the example I gave earlier, doing race play is their form of owning that oppression, owning the racial injustice that they go through every day, being in more control of, you know, things that are typically beyond our control as a people. So it never hurts to just keep checking in and voicing those concerns, like, and you know, doing so respectfully, having that open dialogue. I'm concerned, you know, I am a sex worker and I do want you to fulfill whatever fantasy or fetish fulfillment you have, but I do want to check in and say, is doing so re-traumatizing you? Do you maybe have a sex therapist or any type of therapist on site that could support you and guide you through this? It never hurts to check in, you know, just like we do in that negotiating piece and setting things up. Being okay with doing so, but just the fact that everyone's asking these questions let me know that the awareness is there and the concern is very present. And even that alone says a lot. So I'm really liking the questions like this. I wish I could give more detail and more resources for it, but that's the, you know, only advice I could give. Just always checking in, always being completely transparent and open and honest, like, hey, I'm concerned, you know, I don't want this to be re-traumatizing for you. What are you doing to make sure that that's not the case? Or what are you taking away from this that makes you feel empowered? So just having that education piece as well for yourselves. Okay, you're awesome. Love a fellow Southerner. Thank you so much. Much love there, much love. Okay. Probably aftercare is important. Exactly, Marissa. And I cannot stress that enough. I could have did a whole presentation on aftercare alone because I think it's probably, people forget about it. And even myself, I'm just like, wow, that is a thing. You know, what do I want after the scene? Do I want to cuddle? Do I want to process? Do I want my space? And I found that it's different from person to person. It's different case by case, depending what the scene included. So definitely important as well. And if you're dealing with sensitive topics such as people of color and oppression and things of that nature, you know, just maybe set out even extra time for that, because I'm sure a lot of lifelong, you know, healing and trauma is taking place there. So aftercare, important piece of it. And I'm glad that you reminded me to re-emphasize the importance of it. Okay. I don't know, Kelly, if I'm over time or if you still have room for more questions.
Hi, yes, you still have a few room for a few more questions if you want, or we can wrap it up. We've had a question in the chat, which is just Michael asking if you can let us know where else people may be able to get hold of you.
Oh, yes, let me add it. I love building the community. I love it. Let me put my Instagram and my email too.
That would be wonderful.
Let me figure it out.
I love your map with all the details of where people most like things. I found that.
Isn't that cool?
I too am a bit of a statistics girl. I like things to where things are all going. So like that is just perfect.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people have downloaded that and they've got their certain fetish and have decided to book a holiday there.
Yeah, it's quite the icebreaker. And I looked everywhere for a worldwide one because I'm really curious about that. But
Well, as a person that has been to Kit Kat Club, when we were at the XBiz Awards, it was brilliant. We
yeah,
took up with over. It's very interesting.
I traveled all the way to Germany just for that, and I don't regret it at all. So glad I got some Kit Kat fans in the house. I love it.
Well, what a good news. Well, Devin, thank you ever so much for your time today. And like I say, Devin is one of our therapists that's online. So if you want more information about her, you can always head over to pineapple-support.org, and then you can find out more information. And then maybe if you want to meet Devin, and if you do want any one-on-one therapy with her, you can sign up through there.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much, everyone, for sharing this space with me by being present and just showing up. It means so much. Enjoy the rest of the presentation, and yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Devin. You take care. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Right. Right, guys, what we're gonna do is we've got a next presentation is coming up in just 9 minutes. We're gonna put you on just as just a pause for the moment so we can regroup and get everyone together. So if you just bear with us, and we'll be back with you just in a short break. So go and grab a quick drink or nip to the loo, and we'll see you in a second.